turn this off.
So Charles, whenever you're ready to get started, your call. I don't know if more folks are going to be joining or not.
You know what? I'm going to resend to my mailing list the updated link. I received a couple of messages that they were having some login issues here.
Okay, no problem at all.
Okay. And actually, Jose, I see that we've got quite a number of folks that are here as attendees. They may have just gone in that way. And so I don't know what might be easier for the Q&A part, if there's a way to mass move all of these folks up, or
Yeah, we can do that. If it's easier for you to just let me know which ones I can bring them up. Sorry about that, Charles.
Oh, no, that's fine. I see that there's 26 folks in here. They all look like names we all recognize, so I'd say
Okay.
it's free to bring them all up.
Okay, we can do that. Yeah. Charles, did you want to bring them up after the presentation, or you want me to bring them up now?
Well, I guess it doesn't really impact their ability to participate right now, so we are going to wait for Q&A towards the end, so that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
It looks like we've got quite a few folks in here, and it continues to grow, so maybe it makes more sense for you to do it all at once as people continue to populate in. We're already at 31 now. We were at 25 before, so. But as that continues to grow, should we go ahead and kick things off?
Sure, Charles, I'm happy to kick things off. First of all, thank you very much for hosting this initial public outreach, public engagement effort of the Reston Comprehensive Plan Task Force. So I want to thank you, Charles, not only for hosting this, but also for hanging in there and being part of the task force. This was something the task force spent almost 2 years. As a matter of fact, it pretty much matches the time of the pandemic in terms of the task force activity. Everything was done, at least through the interim recommendations that are going to be the focus of today's discussion. Everything was done remotely, everything online. And I do want to thank Jose and Lisa from my office for really moving all that forward and hanging in there as well. So let's get right into it. Go on to the next slide. And this gives an overview of task force members. It is a group that does include some representatives of the business community, but admittedly is a little more focused probably on the citizen side. But I think it's helpful to see who was a part of this. And I will point out that not everyone agreed with every point that you will hear today, but the process that we are now beginning is an opportunity for people to ask questions and then to articulate any concerns or issues with at least these interim task force recommendations. So go on to the next slide. And this really just goes over where in the process it is. So again, almost two years of work by this task force began in May of 2020. There are 14 areas of the comprehensive plan for Reston, and these recommendations are currently undergoing review by the Department of Planning and Development on the county staff. And then there will be additional feedback provided by county staff to the task force, at which time they will take that into consideration, take into consideration feedback from the chamber, this forum, and other feedback. And then the task force will be making final recommendations. And we'll go over the timeline a little bit later. But that is going to be in the springtime, probably in the May, maybe early June, but somewhere probably the May timeline that those will be finalized. So there also is a review that the transportation recommendations are being reviewed by the county's Department of Transportation. And actually, it's true, it doesn't say it here, but other parts of these recommendations, the parks part is being reviewed by the Park Authority staff, the Heritage Resources section by the Heritage Resources staff, et cetera. So those are all undergoing thorough review, and feedback will be provided to the task force. So with that, and as Charles, if it's okay with you, we will get through these slides quickly and then open it up for Q&A. And I understand you can run the Q&A portion at that time.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the task force members, Jan Bradshaw and John Mooney. Thank you for walking the group through these next several slides until we get to population and urn density. And I think when that slide comes back, I'll hop back in. So Jan and John, take it away.
Okay, let me talk about the planning principles. We provide high-level guidance for future development, seek innovative and sustainable development, and build on the 7 founding principles. Robert Simon. Heritage Resources recognizes the rich diversity of known and potential resources, documents known resources, and identifies and calls for resolution of preservation issues as part of the land use process.
So what the slide says about transportation is that we wanted to manage the relationship between land use and transportation, because it's obviously the land use which developed The trips produces the trips which the transportation system has to handle. Secondly, strengthen the multimodal transportation system. So that means whether you travel by auto, by foot, on bike, or by transit, what we wanted to do was strengthen all of those modes so that no one is compelled to have just one of the modes, and also to strengthen the connection between the modes so that people can, for example, walk to transit or can bike to transit. So trying to connect the interconnectivity there. And then finally, to attend to the environmental, community health, and equity dimensions of life in any community, and especially in Reston, and taking special account of the Fairfax County mandate that we try to build one Reston with greater equity. With public facilities, there's a very thorough inventory of the existing public facilities. So whether it's libraries or firehouses or schools, those are listed. And then those are compared with the future needs for public facilities due to increasing population. And finally, a plan for monitoring future development as part of the implementation plan for the comprehensive plan.
Land use. Provide a clear vision for development that adheres to Reston's planning principles. So, in other words, we have a clear vision of how it's going to go according to the principles laid out in the document of the Reston Task Force Comprehensive Plan. Communicate planning and design recommendations to all stakeholders. Anyone who has an interest in it or a part in it, we would like to have them know what's going on at all times. Ensure transparent, accessible, and equitable community engagement in the land use process. I think this is very important that everyone understands how important the land use is, and all has a say in what they're thinking about it. Affordable housing. Ensure affordable and workforce housing strategies for all income levels. Expand county coordination with the government, nonprofit and for-profit entities, including inclusive planning for new development, not subject to the ADU ordinance. That's Affordable Dwelling Unit Ordinance. So in other words, we want to coordinate with the government and the other nonprofit and for-profit entities to help us with the planning for new development not subject to the ADU ordinance. The county should encourage adaptive reuse of commercial properties in Reston where housing is appropriate and permitted by zoning. For example, if you have a storefront and you would like to change that, or a reuse of a commercial property that was one thing, you can have a store in there for goods and services that have not been offered prior to that. So that is where we are with that.
So under parks, there was also here an inventory of our park assets that we now have, and a look at creating new parks, new recreational facilities, new open space features, for example, along the new and improved W&OD trail, as develop and redevelopment occur without compromising the assets that the community now has. And creating parks is one thing, maintaining high quality parks and facilities is another. So that is given strong emphasis in the plan. And finally, redevelopment requires contributions. So developers are expected to contribute reasonably to the recreation facilities and athletic facilities whose need will be generated by the development, with a special emphasis on the very difficult problem of how you do that in the crowded transit station areas. Under environmental stewardship, it constantly, this chapter constantly emphasizes how Reston was planned precisely to have a concert between human lived and human residential and human work areas with the natural environment, not just juxtapose them, but harmoniously interrelate them. It links all forms of development to nature and trying to mitigate environmental impacts using the highest county standards for environmental protection. And then also creating a healthy environment for all residents and wildlife. We will talk about a later chapter which deals specifically about community health.
Public art. That's one thing that Reston is known for. If you drive anywhere in Reston, you're going to see these wonderful sculptures. We continue to promote all forms of public art in the community, integrate the public art into future development, which is still going on. It's very exciting. And it continues strong partnerships with community partners to create and maintain public art projects. For example, it's very interesting to note that the Hunters Woods School made mosaic plaques to put around the tunnel, and there was no graffiti that was ever drawn on those mosaic tiles that the students did. And this is the kind of thing that I think we want to promote. Economic development, focus on business and job retention for all business entities, including small business. Build upon Reston's recognition as a hub for global and regional business and innovation. We are, with the Silver Line, we are accessible to many people, and of course, with telemarketing, people can be working around the world. So this is what we would like to encourage. Outline clear policy goals to support economic development.
Next slide, please. And the last one that Jan and I will handle is community health. Fairfax County has an initiative to try to integrate community health in other functions of the county. And this Reston Comprehensive Plan chapter in community health, I believe, Walter, is the first comprehensive plan in the county that will explicitly address community health. As it says here, as it relates to physical health as well as mental well-being, it tries to ensure accessible and equitable healthcare access to all residents. It does a very detailed analysis of the healthcare assets we have and those that we perhaps lack. And then finally, it tries to articulate 5 goals, which I can't enumerate right now off the top of my head, but to achieve those community health goals.
Equity impacts would be a new feature for comprehensive planning in Fairfax County, and is so important with one Reston. Potential impacts and benefits to see different communities in Reston should be considered when reviewing and approving zoning applications. So we want an integrated community from all walks of life, all economic background.
All right, thank you so much, Jan and John, for summarizing the interim recommendations of the task force. Now, this slide covers a couple things that were not part of the interim recommendations, but are probably important in terms of background and getting at least some public discussion going on these things. First of all, earlier in the task force deliberation process, county staff, along with Larry Butler from Reston Association, went through a process of calculating the population, the maximum population, if you will, under the existing comprehensive plan for Reston. And depending upon whether or not individual property owners theoretically chose to maximize their non-residential development potential in the existing comprehensive plan, or their maximum residential potential, that range calculated out to about 127,000 people to 157,000 people. That compares with the current population of Reston at about 70,000. So that's just background on county staff calculations of the existing comprehensive plan. And second, urn density. Urn density was something the task force began talking about, but we kind of ran out of time a little bit. There is a subgroup of the task force, 5 members, that are looking at urn density. But the idea, and I guess the question is this: should developers be expected to earn their way to maximum allowable densities in the comprehensive plan? And if so, what should those criteria be? So the question that the subgroup is looking at during this interim period, I would call it, are there items that were not included in the rest of the comprehensive plan that should be included as urn density items? So I know that's a big question mark for a lot of you, particularly who might be landowners or in the development business. But that is an idea that is at least under consideration. So go to the next slide. This is the timeline. So it is February of 2022. I have to say the year in these types of efforts. And then we are in this period of getting initial feedback from different key groups, key stakeholders. And I want to thank the Chamber for being the first group to be part of this process of community engagement. We do expect to get, again, the full feedback from county staff in probably the end of April, early May. At that point, the task force will be looking to finalize recommendations as well as taking input from this process. And then we go into a more extensive period of community engagement during the summer. We expect to see a staff report published the end of the summer, and then this fall, we would expect there to be public hearings by the Planning Commission and then ultimately the Board of Supervisors. So with that, Charles, I'll hand it back over to you. I'm going to go on mute and see if folks have questions or comments on this. I believe everyone hopefully had a chance to at least pull down a copy of the interim recommendations. Good, Charles, I see you doing it now. Nobody's going to get tested on it. How many pages did it end up being? It was a lot.
It was pretty hefty.
Okay, so but if there are questions, we do have several other participants in the task force here as panelists. And what I would recommend is that as people ask questions, if there are people on the panel that had been on the task force, particularly those that may have been chapter leads or topic area leads, they might be best to answer or provide additional information into those questions. So Charles, I'll turn it over to you now.
Fantastic, fantastic. And thank you again. I see a great list of folks that are have joined us. And Jose, thank you for the quick work of bringing everyone in as a participant. So for those of you that have been in and came in as an attendee, you should see that you'll have a few more capabilities to interact here. Down towards the bottom right, I believe, of your screen, you should see a small icon to raise your hand. So if you'd like to raise your hand, we can do it that way. You know, and Walter, and for everyone else here, task force members, what I anticipate over the next few minutes now, just based on conversations that I've had with folks that I've been talking to and inviting to this session today, given the fact that we're the first one on deck and relatively short period of time to be able to review the extensive materials that came out of the interim recommendations, we may very well have some direct questions that hopefully we can answer, but also given the fact that, you know, many folks here that have not been a voice in the process, to the extent that they've been able to review the sections of the task force that are most germane to what they do in the industries and the areas that they represent, and understanding that through this public outreach, this feedback will make its way back to staff during this revision period. I'd also like, you know, if you don't have a question per se, but wanted to offer feedback, recommendations or suggestions on the interim recommendations as we go through this revision process. Obviously, everything that was put forth by a limited number of stakeholders, and we're now having the ability to extend that here with roughly 40 plus people. So that's kind of what I envision here. So whether you've got a direct question, we'll certainly look to answer that with the task force members that are here. But also, in addition, if you'd like to just leave a comment, feedback, perspective that you feel may not have made its way into these interim recommendations, would definitely appreciate that as well.
Hey, Charles, this is John Farrell. Can I just point something out here? I was a little bothered by it, Walter. In your comments, you referred to Larry's population estimate, and that was well before we saw the U.S. Census report. And many of us were skeptical of Larry's numbers, and it turns out we were right. The census reports that we have 63,000, which, and so I would strongly recommend that get corrected in the presentation. What it means is we only grew by about 5,000 people over the last 10 years. And I think that's important because I think that there had been a lot of scare tactics. You and I went through the PRC process when 500 people showed up at South Lakes High School because they were afraid we were going to have 180,000 people trying to crowd into Reston. And I think that having the facts that we only have 63,000 here can help lower the temperature on the part of the fear that we're going to be overrun with additional population. So, I mean, you can look it up. It's on the U.S. Census, and Reston is its own census designated place. But I think it's important to have the accurate facts going forward as opposed to an inexact estimate that was done before the census result was out.
Yeah, John, thank you. I'll just jump in on that one, Charles, if it's okay. Yeah, I think anything relating to the county activity, I could probably speak to. And great point, John. County staff is actually reviewing the numbers this month and next month. And so I'll make sure that they look at the new census numbers and make those revisions accordingly. So appreciate that, John.
Charles?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, this is John Diodor. Supervisor Alcorn, this is John Diodor. My camera's not working, but I am the CEO for Reston Hospital and the market president for HCA's 3 hospitals in Northern Virginia. So I have more of a comment than a question, and maybe tagging on a little bit to John Farrell's comment. We will probably be reaching out to your office to meet separately. It's probably a better forum for us to do that, but I think we have some concerns with the conclusions and some of the data sources used, particularly in the health section, and some of the other opinions that were formulated there, and we perhaps will probably consult with Inova as well and maybe have a joint meeting with you to talk through this. And we would just appreciate the opportunity. I know making the time in your busy schedule, but I know my developer friends may perhaps have a lot to say on this call too, so I don't want to take up the time. But we do have concerns. We have read the report, and we actually have submitted clarifications to some of those, and it would appear, at least what I've read recently, that those have not been acknowledged. So we would just like to discuss that with you in another forum, but appreciate this opportunity, you know, to weigh in. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Happy to meet. So yes, thank you.
And John, thank you,
Thank you,
John,
sir.
for participating and sharing your voice and perspective on the recommendations. That's the purpose here. Akash, I believe you had a question.
Hey, good afternoon, Supervisor Alcorn. I guess first and foremost, it's nice to meet you. I'm a partner with the company EYA, and we are active in Reston, right on top of the metro, as you might be aware. So would love to have the opportunity at some point just to tour you and have you take a little closer look at what we're doing. But so far, we've been well received. So thank you for that great welcoming. My question is this: we have worked fairly closely with a number of your colleagues, Supervisor Faust and Gross and Lusk, in looking at something that was on one of the slides, which is commercial properties that have ended their useful life or have been a victim of what I call Reston's or Tyson's success, where they're burgeoning office parks 20 years ago, but now the tenants are moving closer to where the quote unquote action is. And I saw on one of the slides, there was talk around, you know, housing and potentially some of it being affordable to replace some of those aging office parks, or maybe more broadly, some of those places might need to be reimagined given market forces. So my question is, you know, we've had a lot of conversation and success working with in other districts on those types of efforts, and what your thought is around how some of those things, those places, I should say, might be appropriately addressed.
Akash, thank you. And I don't mean to hog the mic here, but thank you for the question. And actually, I'd love to throw it back to a task force member or two, because this was an issue that I flagged for the task force for discussion. And I don't know if anybody wants to pick up on some of those, some of the task force thinking on that.
I really can't add any informed judgment on this. Is Lynn still here?
Yeah, Lynn, are you on? And I hate to put people on the spot, but I'm going to.
Yes, I'm here.
Lynn.
I was on mute.
No problem. Yeah, Lynn,
Yes,
maybe if you could just sort of talk about the discussions of the task force and some of the thinking.
Well, I really have I think it was Akash Thakar that had the hi, how are you? So could you just kind of maybe restate your question so that I give you a more targeted answer than just a broad?
Sure. So my question was, in Reston and frankly other parts of the county, and even maybe more broadly in many places throughout our region, what we are seeing is commercial properties that have sort of come to the end of their useful life, both because of the building potentially, but also because of their location, which may no longer be suitable for commercial office because there are so many better and more amenitized and closer to transit options. And so the question is, has there been thought given to what might be done to ensure those places remain, or not even remain, become vibrant places as they once were 15, 20 years ago?
So thank you for restating the question for me. I appreciate it. And to answer your question, yes, the land use working group spent quite a bit of time discussing, you know, because Reston does have a goal of jobs and housing that is so that we have as many jobs as we have residents. So we did talk about the balance of jobs to housing, We talked about repurposing existing buildings. We talked about the fact that there are certain locations within Reston that are designated commercial areas that should remain as such. And there are other areas that, in the TOD, non-TOD areas, that we spent quite a bit of time talking about the efficacy of the 75-25 and the 50-50. So it's residential, non-residential, mixed use. We spent, yes, lots of time. And I think you'll find that the recommendations that are included in the land use section, I think that they are very well thought out. So I encourage you to read that once it is available.
Great. I appreciate that. We will. Can you hear me okay? Yep.
Absolutely. Yes.
I appreciate that. We will certainly take a look at the recommendations and maybe follow up with the supervisor as this process moves forward.
Yeah, I do want to point out, though, as you look at this, you have to remember that Reston is unique. We are not Tyson's Corner. We are not other areas. So we are a unique animal, and we do have our planning principles and our open space requirements. So we certainly respected those as well as we were going through this process.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Akash. Josh Ververka, I see you've got your hand raised.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. So I'm actually an alternate member on the task force, and wanted to just take a quick minute and just say, for those that don't know, Josh Ververka with the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. So the realtors have kind of been largely silent throughout the task force process, and I'll say that, unfortunately, it's, we have, as a membership organization, we take our marching orders from our members, and the process of the task force, is receiving kind of a draft a couple nights before discussing. It didn't really allow me to be able to take those drafts before my members and get their feedback. So I didn't want to kind of go off the cuff and take things to my members that weren't finalized. So that's, that's largely just as an explanation of why the realtors haven't weighed in a lot through the task force process. But now that there are interim recommendations, and I'm taking those to my committee to take a look at. But I would say that, just in some of our preliminary discussions with members, there are definitely some concerns. Obviously, representing the property owners, we love the idea of the robust facilities and the parks and the multimodal options for transportation and all the open space. I mean, folks love Reston. But, on the other hand, this plan seems to just exacerbate the problem of rising housing costs. While, there's significant and fairly aggressive like ADU and WDU numbers in the plan, those are generally going to be rental units. When it comes to home ownership, which is kind of the single biggest way to build wealth and equity, there's really not a way for developers to build market affordable units under this plan with all of the requirements that we're putting forward on them in the development process. How are they going to provide those units that folks want to buy and live in if they can't make a project that pencils out to be a business decision for them. So I guess just more so a statement than a question, but how can we find a better balance that's going to help produce housing that folks can afford to buy? And then for Supervisor Alcorn, I guess, what is the best process to get kind of our realtor message back to the supervisor and the task force and staff in the next month or two to make sure, our voice is heard there?
Well, Josh, let me take that last question, and then if anybody else wants to make a comment, please do. But Yes, I would encourage you to pull together any recommendations, comments, get them, I would say, to Jose, so he can share them with the task force members before they make their final recommendations. That also can be shared with county staff, with DPD staff, and it will also be shared with Planning Commissioner Carter, and then I'll also be taking a look. So I guess the short answer is Jose.
And Supervisor, just for clarification, I talked to Jose about this earlier in the week. I see that the email address here is being put out there, so I'm assuming it's official to share this. Obviously, step one in providing feedback is exactly what we're doing right now during this session. But for those that may have questions later or missed this session, this email address, the Reston Plan Task Force at fairfaxcounty.gov, this is a box that it sounds like there will be multiple eyeballs checking the inbox and then can make sure that comments, questions, feedback gets routed to all of the people that need to see that.
Yeah, Jose, can you address that for us? I'm 99% sure, Charles, what you said is accurate.
Happy to speak to that, Supervisor and Charles. Yes, so the Reston Plan Task Force at fairfaxcounty.gov does work. And you should be able to send comments there, and it's easier to share with the task force because we do have that, as Josh, as you know, we do have that listserv set up as well. So,
And I'm assuming, Jose, you've got some other eyeballs so that, you know,
yes.
if God forbid you want to go to sleep at
I have
night.
4 here, but yes, I have more.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you, Josh. Thanks for the feedback there. I got a message. Andrew Painter had a question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And Andrew Painter with Walsh Colucci. I just want to say just a quick appreciation to staff and to the task force and the supervisor's office for working hard on this. The question that I have is more procedural, which is, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but can you just explain how we're going to go from here to a planning commission public hearing later this year? Is staff going to spend time now taking what the task force has produced and sort of reconciling that with planner speak, the typical planner speak that we have with our Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan? Is staff going to come up with its own version of the plan, extracting principles of it? Are they going to take it and try to amend the current plan? How do you see that? How do you see things sort of being reconciled within the current framework of our comprehensive planning documents in the county? And do you see a situation where staff might have its own recommendation that, you know, so 2 documents go to the planning commission? If you could just sort of talk to that.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Andrew. Let me start it and then I'll see if anybody else wants to address it. There are differences in, as you say, plan speak for particularly some of the chapters, some more than others in the task force recommendation and what typically shows up in a Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan. Another difference is the formatting. You know, the format looks a little different in the task force recommendation. Things are organized a little bit differently. That's all being reviewed currently by staff, and they are on the hook to provide written feedback, which could include alternative suggested language. You know, it could be either from a formatting perspective, it could be something more, you know, to be more plan speak. But that's something they will be coming back with and giving to the task force. Now, out of that, if there remain differences, which there could be, some may be more formatting, some may be more editorial, some may be more content and substantive. In that case, as is really always the case, staff may provide recommendations that differ from the task force recommendations, and that, of course, will all go to the planning commission and then ultimately to the board. So I think that's being worked on right now, and don't know if anybody on the task force wants to address that question or concern about any of the task force recommended language.
I would just like to say that my understanding is what we have developed, and we have one that really needs to be more developed, goes to staff, and staff can check the facts. They can look at what is written. They can think about perhaps some things that we might have missed. And they can sort of come to a conclusion. So it's just going to help us get a more comprehensive plan, as it were, of their ideas once they read what we have. I'm sure that they will have more knowledge about certain subjects than we did. And I think that it's just going to make it better. And then when you have the people going to the public and presenting this, they're probably going to have some suggestions too. So I think it's all good. And yeah, there'll be differences. There'll be probably changes. But I think that they might improve it, and the task force will find out. Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
And I'll just offer my perspective, and reason that I find this phase so interesting is, my opinion has been that all of these are separate, deliberate, important processes in the overall execution of revising the comp plan. And I think that each one of these steps are as equally as important as the next. And so for those of us that have been on the task force, if you're going to measure it by number of hours spent, it has been significant. But at the end of the day, we are just one part of this overall process. You all that are here today and those that'll be participating in the remaining public outreach calls and then the extended public sessions over the summer are another equally important part of that process, as are the staff's feedback. So at the end of the day, I would not be surprised, and I would anticipate that what is eventually going to be seen in the fall would look significantly different than what we have right now. And it should be that way based on all of the feedback. Certainly the only way that I could see that what you're downloading now is what shows up at the Board of Supervisors desk in September is if nobody speaks up and nobody shares their feedback. So this is a really exciting element of the process for me, and I'm definitely appreciative of the feedback we've gotten so far. And looks like we've got some more hands raised. And before I go to the next question, I don't know if didn't want to cut off any of the other task force members in addressing Andrew's question.
Charles, I might just pop in and say that we have a schedule that Supervisor Alcorn has in this presentation that kind of lays out where it's going. That might help.
Yep.
Andrew, if he hasn't looked at that, as to where we're going.
Yep, absolutely.
And actually, Charles, let me also just point out, and Gary, thank you for mentioning that. This presentation, I believe, will be shared, Charles, with you, so you can distribute it to anyone on the chamber side if you don't have a copy already. I believe that's the case.
Yep. I'll make sure that not only the folks that have been invited to this call have it, but we'll make it available on the chamber's website as well for folks to be able to see. Great.
Charles and Walter, this is David Vanell. I'm sorry. Could I drop back a bit to talk about Josh's question about the real estate industry here? In the affordable housing section, he's right. The stipulations of percentages and things like that are more aggressive. I'm not sure that's quite the right term, but they are bigger than it has been in the past. And the reasons for that are we need more affordable housing here. The housing prices are through the roof. They're tailoring off a little bit, but we need more affordable housing. It's in line with what the counties plan to increase countywide affordable housing. And in terms of affordability for the developer, in the text of that housing chapter, there are possibilities. Of course, the bonus density possibility has existed before and will continue for developers who want to put in more affordable housing. They're going to get more density. They're going to get more total units. And we're also looking, the county is looking at developing mixed income housing here so that larger buildings, more potential for not only affordable housing, but also housing, period, could allay some of the issues about how a builder goes about developing either ADUs or WDUs. The idea, of course, also is let's make sure that we have a mix of both rental and purchase options for people who either fall into the 60 to 80% of AMI or the folks who are looking for assisted housing at sort of below 50 and 60%. I hope that clarifies, Josh, what you asked about.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just, and definitely we need the affordability there. I think it's just the other housing, if we're kind of, I don't know that it's written anywhere, but there's definitely an air of, kind of holding back some more development in other places while we're, increasing the affordable dwelling units and things like that. We just want to make sure, not just committed affordable, but also just a robust housing supply in general, I think is the key, just to make people able to increase housing, because really the only way to lower affordability is increasing supply.
And if I could piggyback, I know that I may not have everyone in here who is going to be on the call today that would want to weigh in on this. As a representative of the business community, I'd like to just offer here, on the record for some of the feedback that I've received from folks. And I would encourage the staff as they take a look at the revisions, and something that I'm sure will continue to come up in dialogue. And I would imagine more specific comments will come into the inbox as folks who are part of that industry have time to really read through the materials. But just anecdotally, I can tell you that I've heard from many of our members that that's something that they're struggling with understanding is how does this plan allow them to be able to deliver and meet the expectations of the affordable mix of housing with elements of the plan that seem to have a negative impact or restrictive impact on supply. So balancing decreased supply while still maintaining affordability. And I think as our industry folks who are actually the subject matter experts, the ones who have actually put a shovel into the ground and built some of these buildings, can speak to directly the feasibility of these recommendations. It's something I think I might have mentioned towards one of our last task force meetings. I think that somewhere in the process that really does need to be heard. We need to understand, despite what we believe to be true about the conditions of Reston that are as conducive to making this a place prime for development, I think we need to have the folks that are part of these projects provide their input in real world terms on what these guidelines mean for future projects. And considering the immense investment that we made in Metro here, we need to take heed of what these folks are saying and weigh that in to the extent that maybe not enough of that was incorporated into the process to date. It's like I said, this is now the next phase of that where we have an opportunity to provide that impact. And so I would just ask anyone that's on the call today, and certainly folks that I continue to reach out to make sure that you do provide that feedback so that this task force, when we get reconvened, will have that food for thought.
Could I just add something? I think that, Charles, you brought up a key point that at least a lot of us in the land use working group spent quite a bit of time discussing the the bonus density that is granted to developers that are providing WDU and ADU units. But there are confines around the building of those units, such as no elevators and stick built. And, that was one of the things that we said, well, that might be some way for someone to earn density. And that's what Chuck Veach did with Aperture. That structure has ADUs in it, even though it is outside of the parameters of what the county has defined as applicable for ADU and WDU. So that was one of the things that's like, well, that might be something that would earn somebody additional density, is if you do have elevators and you do provide ADUs. So I just wanted to let you know that was one of the things that we really gave quite a bit of noodling over. Of course, yeah, but thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lynn.
Charles, may I make one request though, because we heard from John Farrell that we're now at what was it, John, 63,000, and then I think this plan would go up to 120,000. So I think the question to this group, and hopefully we can get some direct answers, is what should that number be, and what do you want that number to be? Because that would be very helpful to know.
Absolutely. No, I agree. This is the forum for our folks to be able to share information, and excited to be able to do that. And I can tell you, just again, it's anecdotal. As a lot of what we do as task force members have been going out to our communities and sharing and meeting with people. I think a lot of folks are excited to weigh in and provide feedback. Again, I'm not surprisingly, it's going to take a little bit. There'll probably a bit of lead time as folks really acquaint themselves with all of the material and think it through. But really hoping in the weeks to come that we get good information, good feedback. Brian, I saw that you had your hand raised.
I did have my hand raised. Thank you, Charles. Although I think Michelle answered my question, which was a simple one in terms of the note that John Farrell made earlier about 63,000 being the population. And then in the sort of low residential or high residential scenarios under the existing comp plan, I was curious where the draft shakes out in terms of potential residential unit numbers. And it sounds like that number is approximately 120,000. So that would be helpful to know if that is the number. And appreciate that information.
Well, and I could say that the land use working group spent an enormous amount of time going through these calculations. And as Supervisor Alcorn mentioned, we are going to be meeting with staff. So that is a major consideration as these numbers shake out.
I'd like to make a comment about the population figures, because I worked along with Larry Butler and county staff on that. I would say a couple of things. First of all, the Bureau of Census's community census are estimates. Secondly, the boundaries that they use do not coincide with the planning boundaries of Reston's comprehensive plan. And thirdly, I know how assiduously Larry and I worked with internal RA figures, and we came up with a current RA population, RA Reston, of 62,000. So I think what we need to do is remain open-minded and listen, and we'll listen to what the pros in Fairfax County's planning department come up with the population figures. But the community census figure should not be taken as absolutely correct. Thank you.
Additional comments? I had a few folks that pinged me and said they were having a little trouble with the raised hands. If that was you, don't feel bad. We ran into those issues consistently on the task force, even after a couple of years. So, feel free if you'd like to weigh in with a comment, suggestion, just food for thought for the group as a whole. Anything that you may have come across of note in your reading, feel free to unmute and jump in. I do recognize that we are at the top of the hour, and so I want to make sure that I'm respectful of all of our attendees' time, as well as Supervisor Alcorn and staff and our fellow task force members. Barring any other questions, then perhaps what I'd say is, again, thank you, Supervisor, for launching these series of public outreach sessions and allowing the Greater Reston Chamber to be a part of this. And thank you to Jose for all of his diligence in prepping us for today's session, being first on deck here.
I'm sorry, but you're full of shit. Oh my God.
Love it when that mute button doesn't work.
and I would just again in
God Almighty.
in talking to everyone here, I would just encourage everyone to continue to review the materials that are now available. I will continue to disseminate information to anyone that needs it. I would encourage anyone that has information specific to their industry, their company, their organization, as it relates to a chapter. If there's recommendations you'd like to filter through the chamber, or you'd like the chamber to broadcast, I'm happy to do that. Just please make sure you send it my way. Otherwise, the information in the email address is there. And I would definitely just encourage anyone who has some thoughts or suggestions, maybe not sharing today, but please make use of that email address, because it is going to go to the staff. It is going to come back to the task force. And, I'd really love to see a critical mass of different perspectives, different thoughts, food for thought to help guide and shape the next iteration of the recommendations. Absent of relevant, thoughtful commentary, we're not going to see changes to the interim recommendations, to the extent that any of you feel that there are changes that need to be made. And based on my conversations, I know that there are. So, please make sure that you all are taking advantage of this opportunity to make your voice heard. And I'll do anything to support anyone on the call to make sure that information gets routed as necessary. Supervisor, I believe that's it. I don't see any other hands raised.
Well, Charles, I just want to thank you, thank the task force members who are here and presented and answered some questions, and especially thank everybody who is now part of this process for your comments today. And I do want to just underscore what Charles said about communicating concerns, suggestions in the email there on everybody's screen. Please do use that. And as always, don't hesitate to contact my office with any other questions or concerns. So thank you very much, Charles.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye now.